Hi friends, myself Rama. I am working as assistant professor in Mlritm college. Today's my topic is constructors in C++. First of all, before going to constructor, what is class? A class is a combination of data members and member functions. Here, a constructor is a special member function. Constructor name is same as class name. When we consider this syntax, here class name is student, and here in public part we have two functions. One is student and the second one is display. Here void display is a member function. Student is also a member function, but this member function name is same as class name. That's why it is called as constructor. When we use the class name for the function name, then that function is called as constructor. Okay, here it is a special member function. Now this constructor is executed whenever we create the object. But if we want to execute this display member function, we have to call this display function with object. Okay, so here in this example, student is a constructor of the class student. Now it is declared in the public part. Here it can be invoked or executed when we create the object in the main function. Basically, this constructor is used to initialize the data members of a objects. For example, if this class contains a comma b variables, now that variables can be initialized in this constructor. Okay, then it will be executed whenever we create the object. It is executed implicitly, but this display member function is executed by using the object explicitly. Now let us see the types of constructors. There are three types: default constructor, parameterized constructor, copy constructor. Now let us see the first one, default constructor. A default constructor is a constructor that doesn't have any argument. For example, when we consider this example, here the class name is student and the constructor name is same as class name. Now here we have one more member function, that is display. Now here it is a main function. Now one object is created for the class student, that is std. When this line is executed, whenever the object is created for the class student, automatically first it executes the constructor. Now here this constructor does not have any parameters. That's why this constructor is called as default constructor. A constructor without any parameters are called default constructor. Next, second line is std.display. Here what is std? std is an object and display is a method. We are calling this display member function by using the object. Now it calls the member function display. So here object is created, automatically it executes the constructor, but we have to call explicitly by the display function because it is not a constructor, it is a normal member function. A default constructor is a constructor that doesn't have any argument. It has no parameters. Now this constructor does not have any parameters, means zero parameters. So it is also called as zero argument constructor. The compiler automatically creates an implicit default constructor if the programmer does not define one. For example, if you forgot to define the default constructor, the compiler automatically implicitly calls the default constructor. It automatically creates the one default constructor. Now it is an example for default constructor. Here we are creating the object std, but we are not passing any values. So by default it calls the default constructor. Here the constructor does not have any parameters, that's why we are not sending any values. Now The output is, after the execution of this program, we will get this type of output. First, it executes the constructor. So, the output is default constructor. This is the first line. Next, we are calling the display function by using the object std. Then it displays it is a member function. Now, this is the difference between normal member function and constructor. Here, constructor is automatically executed whenever we create the object to that class. But we have to explicitly call the member functions by using the object of that class. Now, the second one is parameterized constructor. Here, the difference between previous default constructor and parameterized constructor is, the parameterized constructor, it contains some parameter values. Means we have to use some parameters within the parentheses. Here, the constructor name same as class name. Next, here we have to pass some parameters values. Constructors can also take parameters which can be useful for setting initial values of the attributes. A constructor with parameters is known as parameterized constructor. Now, let us see the example for parameterized constructor. Here, there are three variables, data members, marks 1, marks 2 and total. Next, it is a constructor, but this constructor is called as parameterized constructor because here we are using two parameters or two arguments int a comma int b. Next, that a value is copied into marks 1 variable and the b value is copied into marks 2 variables, and also we have one more function, member function, that is display. Now, here I am going to calculate total marks 1 plus marks 2 and now I am printing the total marks. But in main function, okay, first I am creating one object, that is std. Here there are two values, one is 50 and the second one is 68. So, when this object is created, first it calls the parameterized constructor. Here the first value 50 is copied into variable a and the second value 68 copied into variable b. Now, here it is a memory. The first a value is 50 and the next b value is 68. Okay, now the object name is std. So, here we are initializing the data members of the class student marks 1 and marks 2 by using these two values 50 and 68. First, the 58 is copied into variable a. Now, marks 1 equal to a. Marks 1, now the value is a, marks 2, the value is 68. So, these are the AB values, that AB values are copied into marks 1 and marks 2. Next, we are calling the display function std. It calls the function display total equal to marks 1 plus marks 2. So, first marks 1 equal to 50, next second one is 68. Okay. So, the output is total marks equal to 118. So, when we call the display function, it calculates the total and it prints the marks, total marks equal to 118. Now, here we are creating the object and also we are passing some values. That values are passed to the constructor. So, here the constructor contains two parameters, that's why it is called as parameterized constructor. But in the previous example, the constructor does not have any parameters, means zero parameters. But in this example, this constructor contains two parameters. That's why it is called as parameterized constructor. Next, third one is copy constructor. A constructor is a member function that initializes an object using another object. Means we can copy the one object values into another object, okay, by using the constructor. That's why it is called as copy constructor. Means we are copying the values of one object to another object. One more important point in this copy constructor is the argument should be a object of the same class. So, here we have to pass argument as a object as an argument to the constructor. So, whenever we want to use a copy constructor, we have to use either default or parameterized constructor before the copy constructors. Let us see the example. Now here class name is student and it contains 3 variables and there are 2 constructors. The first constructor is parameterized constructor and the second constructor is copy constructor. So student int a comma int b. So here a comma b values are copied into marks 1 and marks 2 variable. Next student, it contains the class name student and it is an object reference. So there are one more data member function, that is display. Next we are creating 2 objects std1 and std2. When this first object is created, first it calls the parameterized constructor because this class contains 2 constructors, but first one is parameterized constructor and the second one is copy constructor. Here the argument, the calling the constructor is depends on the type of the argument and the number of the arguments. Here whenever we create the first object std1, it calls the parameterized constructor because in this constructor, in the second constructor, it contains only one argument and that argument should be a object. But in this, at the time of creation of the std1 object, we are passing only 2 integer values. So before execution of the constructor, the compiler, it verifies the number of the arguments and the data type of the arguments. How many arguments are there? There are 2 arguments. So it compares the constructor 1 and constructor 2. Here in these 2 constructors, the first constructor, it contains 2 arguments. So it calls the parameters first constructor and the first value is copied into variable a and the second value is copied into variable b. That a comma b values are copied into marks 1 and marks 2. Here it is std1. The first variable is marks 1. So the first value is 75, that is copied into a, and the second one is marks 2. So what is the second value? 80, that is copied into b. From b it is copied into marks 2. Next here we are creating one more object std2. So second object is created to the same class. There are 2 variables, marks 1 and marks 2. Marks 1 and marks 2. But here in this constructor, in this creation of the object 2, we are using only one argument and this argument is a object of the same class. Okay. First here when we use this object as an argument, then it calls the copy constructor. That std1 object values are copied into s object. Here std1 values are copied into s object. So marks 1 equal to s dot marks. It is nothing but std1 dot marks 1. So what are the values in std1? 75. That value is copied into marks 1 in the object 2 because we are executing this constructor after the creation of this object 2. So the first value is 75. Next marks 2 equal to s dot marks 2. So here s is replaced by std1 dot marks. So what is the value of marks 2? 80. Now that is copied into marks 2 of s2 to second object. So here by using these 2 objects, we are calling the parameterized constructor and copy constructor. In these 2 cases, we are initializing the values. std1 values are copied into parameterized constructor and std2 objects. Whenever we create the std2 object, the std1 object values are copied into std2. So std1, marks 1 and marks 2, these 2 values are copied into second object, that is std2. Next, we are calling the display function by using the object 1, std1. So whenever we execute this line, the control, it goes to the display function. Now here we are calling this display function by using the object 1. So in this object 1, what are the marks 1 and marks 2? 75 plus 80, total 155. Next, it prints the value total marks equal to 155. Next, after the execution of this one, again we are calling the same display function by using the second object. Now, second object values are 75 plus 80. So, here also we will get the same total marks. When we observe this output, total marks equal to 155. Next time also total marks equal to 155 because we are calling the same display function by using two different objects. But in these two different objects, the marks 1 and marks 2 values are same, 75 and 80. Here, how we are getting the same value 155 in second case also means the first object values are copied into second objects, okay, by using the copy constructor. In this copy constructor, the first object values are copied into second object. Here the second object is std2 and the first object is std1. Now this is called as copy constructor. So three types of constructors are completed. Okay, first one is default constructor, means that constructor does not have any parameters, and the second one is parameters constructor, means a constructor which contains at least one parameter. Next, third one is copy constructor. One object values are copied into another object. When we try to use a copy constructor in our program, first we had to use either default constructor or parameter constructor only. So this default constructor or parameter constructor are executed whenever we create the object 1. So that object values are copied into another object in this copy constructor. So next topic is constructor overload. When we observe this previous example, here there are two constructors, student. The constructor names are same, but the number of parameters and the arguments of the parameters are different. Whenever we use the same member function more than one time in a same class, then it is called as function overloading. Here we are using the constructors more than one time, then it called as constructor overloading. In C++, we have more than one constructor in a class with the same name. As long as each has a different list of arguments, then this concept is called as constructor overloading. So in this previous example, there are two constructors, but these two constructors are differentiated by using the number of parameters. Next, overloaded constructors essentially have the same name and different by number and type of the arguments. Here the constructor names are same, but the number of parameters and the data type of the parameters are different. A constructor is called depending upon the number and the type of arguments passed. In this previous example, when we construct this program for the constructor overloading, class name is student and this is the first constructor, this is second constructor and this is third one. First one, second one and third one. So first one is default constructor. Why it is called as default constructor? Because the constructor does not have any parameters. And the second one is called as parameterized constructor because this constructor contains two arguments. And the third one is, it is also a parameterized constructor, but here the parameter is object. That's why it is called as copy constructor. So here in this example, we are using same constructor 3 times, student, student, student. But these 3 constructors are differentiated by the number of parameters. In the first constructor, it is 0 arguments. It contains 0 arguments. But in the second constructor, there are 2 arguments. In the third constructor, it contains only one argument, but that argument is a object. So here, when we create the object, automatically constructor will be executed. But in this case, which constructor is executed first? There is a question. Okay. So that is depends on the number of parameters we are passing. So a constructor is called depending upon the number and type of argument passed. Okay, whenever we observe this one, here we are creating 3 objects. So we have to execute 3 constructors. But which constructor will be executed first? There is a question. That is depends on the number of arguments we are passing. In the first case, one object is created. First object is created, that is std1. Here this std1 does not have any parameters. So it calls the default constructor. Because there are no values we are passing, then here this constructor does not have any arguments. So the first, whenever we create the object 1, by default it executes default constructor. Here we are initializing the marks 1 and marks 2, values are 0. So first std1 marks 1, we are initializing the marks 1 and marks 2 by using the default constructor, that initial values are 0. Next we are creating object 2. But here there are 3 constructors, but how many values we are passing? 2 values we are passing. Then compiler, it verifies the 3 constructor. First it goes to the first constructor. Here what are the number of arguments? 0. Now how many arguments we are passing? 2. So the number of parameters are not matching. Then it goes to the second constructor. Now how many parameters are there? 2 parameters. Now how many we are passing? 2 parameters. Okay, here the 2 parameters, number of parameters are matching. Then it executes the parameterized constructor. Now here we are initializing the marks 1 and marks 2 by using a and b values. Next std2 marks 1 value and marks 2 value. So what is the first value? 75. Next, what is the second value? 80. Now here marks 1 equal to 70, marks 2 equal to 80. The 2 values are copied into object 2, marks 1 and marks 2. Next std3. We are creating third object by passing the 1 argument, but here this argument is an object, std1 object. Now it calls the copy constructor. Now here the object 1 values are copied into s object. So marks 1 equal to s dot marks. Here what is s? S is nothing but std1 object, means first object. So first object marks are copied into std3, third object. So here we are copying the object 1 values into object 3. So marks 1 and marks 2. So the first object values are copied into object 3. So marks 1 equal to std1 dot marks. What are the values in std1? So marks 1 value is 0. Next marks 2 equal to s dot marks 2. What is s value? std1. std1 dot marks 2. So what are the marks 2 values? 0. So here in this third case, third line, this object 1 values are copied into object 3 in this copy constructor, because we are passing the argument as an objects. So that object values marks 1 and marks 2 are copied into this third object marks 1 and marks 2. Next call display function. Here we are calling the display function by using the 3 different objects. First we are calling std1 dot display. So it calculates the total equal to marks 1 plus marks 2. So we are calling this display function by using the first object. So what are the values in the first object? 0 plus 0. 0 plus 0 equal to 0. So what are the total marks? 0. Next we are calling the same display function by using the object 2. So what are the values in the object 2? 75 plus 80 equal to 155. Total marks equal to 155. Next, we are calling the same display function by using the third object. Again, it calls the same display by using the object. So, what are the values in the object 3? 0 and 0. So, 0 plus 0 equal to 0. Now, total marks equal to 0. Now, here in this example, we are using the same constructor for multiple times. Then it is called as constructor overloading. Whenever we use the same function or same constructor more than one time, then it is called as overloading. Next, while creating the object, arguments must be passed to let compiler know which constructor needs to be called. In this example, just here we are creating 3 objects. At the time of creation of each object, the compiler executes the appropriate constructor only. Because in the first case, at the time of the creation of object 1, it calls the default constructor only. Because here we are explaining clearly to the compiler, this object does not have any parameters means, okay, it calls only default constructor. Default constructor means it does not have any parameters. Next, at the time of the creation of object 2, we are passing 2 values. Then the compiler directly it goes to the parameterized constructor and it also verifies the argument values. Okay, how many values are there? 2 values. And what are the data type of the arguments? Integer, integer. Okay, it verify everything. Then only if everything is matched, then only the compiler executes the constructor. Okay. Now this is called as constructor overloading. So in this video, I have completed what is constructor, what are the different types of constructors and what is constructor overloading. Now let us see the characteristics of the constructor. Okay, the first point is the name of the constructor is same as its class name and the constructors are mostly declared as in the public member of the class, okay, by using the keyword. Constructors do not have return values, hence they do not have a return type. Okay, when we observe the previous example, student, 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 these are the constructors, but whenever we observe the method display, it contains return type void. But in these 3 constructors, we are not using any return type, either void, int, float. We are not using any return type to the constructor and the constructors are always be a part of the public. Next, a constructor gets called automatically when we create the object of the class. Okay, whenever we observe in this example, the display is called by using the object name, but here the constructors are executed automatically whenever we create the object. Next, a constructor gets called automatically whenever we create the object of the class. Multiple constructors can be declared in a single class. Okay, we can create any number of 3 types of constructors in a single class only. In case of multiple constructor, the one with matching function signature will be called. That will be covered in this example. Here, it calls the default constructor, it calls the parameters constructor, it calls the copy constructor. That is depends on the signature of the constructor. Here, there are no parameters means it calls the default constructor. Here, it calls the parameters constructor. That constructor should contains only 2 parameters. Okay, that constructor only executed. Next, the third constructor, the third object it calls the copy constructor because it contains only 1 argument. So, in case of multiple constructor means constructor overloading, the one with matching function signature will be called. Okay, these are the characteristics of the constructors. Okay, these are the references. Thank you.